With 6 classes to choose from and 2 ascendancies per class, Path of Exile 2 affords you a ton of options for creating the character of your dreams. In this video, I want to showcase my Warbringer Warrior build that I've been using to level to max level. Utilizing Aftershock, Totems, Slams, and Jagged Ground mechanics, we have a fun character that can basically blow the entire screen up via their totems while dishing out tons of bleed and armor break across the board. If this is your first time on my channel, the way I do things is by uploading the knowledge in my videos. So with that being said, we'll be using the Shockwave Totem, Leaping Slam, Earthquake, Infernal Cry, Bone Shatter, Perfect Strike, Sunder, Resonating Shield, and Overwhelming Presence skills for this build. On the passive tree, I focus primarily on totems, increased damage, stun buildup, aftershock and area damage, block chance, and use my ascendancy to build up more armor break and get even more block chance as well as ancestral spirits for my totems. You can find the entire build linked in the pinned comment and description that gives written details of what skills, stat priorities, support gems, and what have you. So if that's what you'd rather do, then just go ahead and look at that. It is there for you. But that's the down and dirty of this build. So if that's all you wanted to know, then please feel free to shut the video down and get back to enjoying your warrior in Path of Exile 2. If you are heading out though, and this video did indeed help you, please don't forget to like, comment, or subscribe, as each one of those things helps me out in a huge way. Lastly, don't forget to check me out on Twitch, where I stream this game every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, as well as plenty of other ones. And before I forget, let me give a huge shout out here to Fervor Gaming. He was helping me quite a bit and just a lot of incessant questions about my build. Mainly, I think it was just me just sending him Discord messages and getting things out of my brain. But a huge shout out to him, and I'm going to put a link in the description in the pinned comment, so please go check him out, find his most recent video, and like rate it and say that Spartacus sent you or something fun like that. I'm always big on supporting other people within a space, especially like Path of Exile, to make sure they get as many eyes on them as possible. Well, let's get started on the ultimate Totem Warrior leveling build in Path of Exile 2. Loading into the game, let's start us off by going over the skills my character is using. You can see in the lower right hand corner, this is all of them. Let's go ahead and bring up the skill menu and talk more about them. So the first thing that we're going to be talking about is our Mace Strike, and I will talk more about our gear, our progression, our skill passives, because this is going to change from the moment that you start the game and the moment that you get a specific passive. You will either use dual wielding or a two-handed weapon up until the point that you get the Giant's Blood passive, in which case then you will use a two-handed weapon and shield like I am currently using. So I'm using the two-handed weapon Mace Strike. We're putting Brutality into that to give us more physical damage, of course shutting down any chaos or elemental damage, Martial Tempo to increase our attack speed, followed by Close Combat to just give us more attack damage. We don't need to be worrying about further distance from us because we're a melee character, so that 1 meter from you, 25%, we're going to be benefiting from that quite a bit. Leap Slam is our mobility skill here, and Leap Slam of course is going to be nice here because it's going to help with a ton of stun buildup. It gives us an impact radius, and because of what we've got here, it says consumes fully broken armor on enemies to cause 500% more stun buildup. Let's look at how we can deal with that more. So our Overpower support here hits with supported skills, cause 50% more stun buildup. Stun is a big portion of this, and it's going to help us trigger some real big slams with Bone Shatter. Going into some of our other stuff, we have Stomping Ground, triggers a shockwave when you take a step while using supported skills. So when we press this skill, we'll create a shockwave, and then when we land in that location, we create a shockwave. Just gives us some more damage here, and if I hold down Alt and press this, we know after the most recent patch that shockwave deals 80 to 100% of your strength as physical damage. So at the beginning of the game, that's not a whole ton of damage, but as you scale up, as you do more, as you have more strength to take advantage of, you'll be able to pull more damage into this ability. For Bone Shatter, this is what we're going to primarily use to detonate stun buildup and cause heavy stuns. Now, once we cause the heavy stun, we use Perfect Strike to take advantage of it, but this has a pretty good range on it, and it has a little shockwave attached to it that does a little more damage too. Well, fun stuff there. But the big thing is that this is going to help devastate. So supported skills fully break armor when inflicting a heavy stun. So if we haven't been able to break armor through any of the other means that I'll talk about in just a little bit, or just on waves of monsters, this will help break tons of armor for us to then take advantage of Perfect Strike and other things. But the nice thing about Bone Shatter is I've got Impact Shockwave on it. So if I have a whole horde of monsters that are all ready, you know, that little globe above their head because they're primed for a heavy stun explosion. I can use this because it's going to heavy stun them and then create an aftershock that does the same damage to enemies within 2 meters. So basically, we use the totems to create tons of stun, then use Bone Shatter to trigger mass explosions across the board. And I'm going to jump now to Perfect Strike because that's going to be our biggest damage dealer for single target damage. Converts, if you just hit the normal strike, it's 40% physical to fire damage. But Perfect Strike here, you can see the attack damage is 766% and converts 80% of it to fire damage. So quite a good little bit right there. Also, it always ignites, which is going to help do increased magnitude of damage to them. But for our Perfect Strike, we've socketed it with Execute, so it's going to deal 40% more damage with hits against enemies that are low on life. Low on life we know to be 35% or less. Since we don't have any like immediate culling capabilities, this helps us do mass amount of damage towards the end of especially a heavy boss or act boss's health. We also have window of opportunity, so we have a shorter perfect timing window, so it's harder to hit that perfect timing, but the perfect timing now does 50% more damage. It's huge. And then further on, an exploit weakness, this thing cannot break armor anymore, but that's okay. We've already primed the break with Bone Shatter, right? This is what knocks something into heavy stun. Now we're going to use this to do 50% more damage to something with a fully broken armor. So we put these two together and we're doing 100% more damage with a Perfect Strike against something with broken armor. It's bueno. Stoked just talking about it. Now for the big kind of wombo combo of this build, we have Shockwave Totem. Shockwave Totem on its own is not too exciting, and I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. Totems right now are weird and lackluster, but what I've found is I've used this capability. So raise a totem that slams the ground around it, repeatedly damaging nearby enemies. Jagged ground erupts when hit by this slam, damaging enemies standing on it. Jagged ground also slows things down. So the slam, we can see what it does, attack damage 257%. We use the capabilities here, and the eruption is attack damage 55%. We use all this in conjunction with Earthquake to have it have a cascading effect of explosions and critical hits and damage and stun and bleed and armor break. It's a really awesome cocktail of tons of, I mean, do I call armor break an ailment? Ailments everywhere. So we use those things in conjunction. So Shockwave Totem will trigger the jagged ground of our Earthquake. We'll use Lacerate to have a 50% chance to inflict bleed, and then Overabundance to increase the limit of our totems. We'll also use passives to help increase the amount of totems, and also passives to offset this. Supported skills have 50% less skill duration. So we'll be able to offset that pretty early in our build. Let me jump down over here to Earthquake real quick, since we're talking about our Shockwave Totem. So Earthquake, of course, smashes the ground, dealing damage in an area, leaves behind jagged ground. The jagged ground erupts in a powerful aftershock after a duration. What's important here is A, you cannot create an existing patch. So you're only, you're limited to 2 jagged grounds at first, then eventually 3, and I think it scales up to 4. I'm not sure what the actual scaling is. But my point here is you can't double stack or an erasy or whatever the hell the thing is. You can't put 2 patches in the same spot. But what this does is it creates jagged ground that this totem is then going to erupt for us. So it will constantly be just blowing up. The totem will blow up, it'll do its slam damage. It will trigger the jagged ground to do slam damage. The earthquakes will do its own aftershock damage. It's just constant cascading damage. In the earthquake itself, we have Splinter, break armor equal to 15% of the physical damage dealt by the supported skill. We can see here with the aftershock, it does 249% attack damage. And this is 15% of that physical damage, and you can get all that information is in here if you want the actual goods of what that looks like, right? But Fist of War, attacks with supported skill are ancestrally boosted, giving us a 20% more damage in area of effect. It's only going to be active for the first one when we do this. It's every 6 seconds, so it just gives us a little bit of alpha strike potential. And lastly, Bloodlust. Supported skill deals 30% more physical damage against bleeding enemies, but it cannot cause bleeding. So the Shockwave Totem puts a bleed on them, and then we get more damage on our Earthquake from this, from the existing bleed. It's a nice little combination. Going back up a little bit here, we're going to use Infernal Cry to empower our perfect strikes. This is going to make it so that it does more damage, empower melee attacks. Empowered skills do not have inherent bonuses, but a number of stats and modifiers specifically apply to empowered skills. And we'll use Corrupting Cry here to do 25% of your strength as physical damage per second. That's a real great ability there. And we use Raging Cry to help generate rage. Basically, we use this before jumping into, what the hell is it called? Perfect Strike. So because powered attacks gain 25% of damage as fire damage per 5 power of enemies in range up to 100. Obviously, this is better when you do it on big groups, but we're just using it for single target damage pretty much. Resonating Shield is another big focus in this build. We use this to break armor. It now scales, in the most recent patch, 6 to 8 added physical damage per 15 armor on a shield. So this allows us to do quite a little bit. But in addition now, it will break endurance for us. So it helps generate endurance charges, which we use for our Infernal Cry, because if it uses endurance charges, we get more attacks that are empowered. And we use Demolisher, so it blows up armor faster. So these things in conjunction make it so that everything's armor is broken, everything is bleeding, everything is going to have tons of stun buildup, and we have lots of ways to capitalize on it. Our last two abilities are Overwhelming Presence, which is going to help us reduce the stun threshold of enemies within our radius. Also, their Elemental Ailment threshold. I've been trying to work with that, but I don't like it as much. I want that stun buildup. But in addition to, because I have additional Spirit, this now regenerates 1 life per second and 30 mana regen. So we get a lot of health and mana support on a build that is mana starved in the early portions of the game. Then lastly, we have Sundered here, just give us some range punching power. And the fun thing about this too, consumes fully broken armor on enemies to guarantee a critical hit. And that, I mean, this thing does a pretty good amount of damage, all said and done, because you can really stack up a lot of effects into it. 100% increased critical damage bonus, which is cool, so its crit hits are even stronger. And supported skills have 50% chance to create Jagged Ground. We've already seen what Jagged Ground does with our totems. And also Aftershock, meaning it will just basically send a whole nother one of these slams out. It's really, really, really cool. So you use this more or less to give you some range fighting power in situations where you just can't get close, because you will find that that is going to be very often as melee. You just want to get a little bit of room. So these are your skills that you'll be using. Let's go now into the passive section and how this all comes together. I lied. We're not going to talk about passives. I want to talk quickly about our leveling skills. Now, you've seen that I'm using Sunder, I'm using Leap Slam, I'm using Perfect Strike. Those abilities are a little bit further in the skill tree, as it were. When you first start the game out, use these top three: Earthquake, Bone Shatter, and Rolling Slam. And then as soon as you unlock Shockwave Totem, you'll jump into Shockwave Totem and get Infernal Cry. You'll pretty much be set with those 5, and then you'll jump into Resonating Shield once you get it. You'll swap out Rolling Slam with Leap Slam because they will fit roughly the same purpose, but I find that Rolling Slam just has way too long of a windup. When you play the game, when you're leveling up this character, you're gonna be like, well, Rolling Slam feels really lackluster. It did just get a big buff, which is nice, but the big thing you need to know with Rolling Slam is you're gonna use it to initiate combat. When you're charging into things, right before you kind of hit them, maybe like you're 5-10 meters out, like 5-6 meters out, use Rolling Slam. Your character will travel the distance and hit and do big damage. So that's the nice thing about this. It's just a way to kind of close that gap. Like I said, you will swap this out for Leap Slam as soon as possible. And remember, my build guide here is supposed to inspire you on how to play this game, not tell you exactly how to play this game. So if you say, you know what, I actually like Armor Breaker, then swap it in. If you want to play with Molten Blast rather than Sunder, which I actually did use at one point, then go for it. If you want to focus more on Infernal Cry and eventually Seismic Cry, and you Earth Shatter to really play around with those mechanics, please do that. I want this to act as a general guideline, and I want you to feel comfortable to swap out the things that you want in your build, because you should play this game however the fuck you want. Now let's take a look at some passives. And one last thing too before getting into our passives that I forgot to talk about is Scavenge Plating. This is the spirit option that you will use prior to using Overwhelming Presence. This is a tier 2 spirit capability, but this will help us by anytime we break armor, just gives us a little bit more armor. You could keep this on with Overwhelming Presence if you have the spirit options, but I would just go with Scavenge Plating. In the meantime, another option too is Herald of Ash, and that kind of factors more off of fire damage. Personally, I find that Herald of Ash is not good compared to Herald of Ice or Herald of Lightning, because I find that those two have so many more fun characteristics, where Herald of Ash requires you to do overkill damage, which means you did, like, let's say they only had 1 health left and you did 100 damage, then that 99 damage is overkill, and that factors into it. But Scavenge Plating, I think, is probably a little bit safer of a bet, and it gives you some more defense in the early portions of the game. So rather than just showing you a completed board, which I've got linked below, you can go ahead and do that, I'm going to show you how you should progress through this on a per level basis. And we're just going to start off right here. And the big focus is we're going to go through these top ones and pick up Brutal for more strength, increased damage, and stun buildup. And roughly, you know, you're going to be at whatever level you're going to be, right? So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, level 7, level 8, level 9, level 12, level 13. And we're going to grab these two because those are going to help us out as well. So you should be roughly coming into Act 2 at this point, in which case you're going to come around a point where you'll choose your Ascendancy. Let's keep going up this because we're going to talk about that in a little bit. So I want you to push up here, and these little attribute nodes, you're going to choose Strength for them unless you absolutely need to choose something like Intelligence or Dexterity. Feel free to do it. You can just simply respec that point later on once you no longer need it, because you've gotten that filled with whatever equipment that could fill that gap. Like, for example, I recommend Martial Tempo, which requires an amount of dexterity to have access to those support gems. Remember how support gems work in the game, right? You need to have a certain amount of stats to allow a certain amount of strength, dex, or intelligence-based support gems. So just make these work. But I will tell you, you want to primarily focus on strength because we're going to get a keystone that is going to require a ton of strength. So probably around level 17 or 18, again, depends on what you've done in the game. If you've gotten the weapon specialization things, you'll be a little ahead of the curve here. We want to push up into this for our totem placement speed, because totem placement speed means that when you press the button to place the totem, it is far faster. So we need these active as soon as possible. Our totem damage is nice, but the big thing we want is supportive ancestors. 25% increased damage while you have a totem active. 1, 3, 15, it doesn't matter. Only one needs to be active to give you this buff, and it's very, very nice. So once we have that, you should just about be at the point to select your first 2 points into your Ascendancy. We're going to choose Block Chance here and then go into Renly's Training. This is going to gain 40% base chance to block from equipped shield instead of the shield's value. So regardless of whatever the shield's value says, right? If it says like 47 block, or I'm sorry, it says 37% block chance, it doesn't matter. It's now 40. So this just makes it far easier to not have to worry about certain values on your shield's rolls. You're guaranteed 40%. And what we want to do is focus on this because we want this to be at our max cap of 75%. That will give us damage bonuses. So let's now go back to our tree. We've gone up here and grabbed this. So our totems are giving us damage. We're doing some good action. Now we want to focus on getting this keystone active. This keystone is going to make it so that we can use two-handed axes, maces, and swords in one hand. Triple attribute requirement of the weapon, though. So if something requires 50 strength to use, it now requires 150 strength to use. So this is crucial to getting online, but you have to understand, if you go just beelining for it, you have to prepare your strength. That comes down to your gear. Getting tons of strength gear is how you really get this thing online early. But I'm going to show you how we can turn this on just a little bit before that. So we're going to come back to our tree over here. We're going to go down, and you're best off just choosing strength for all these attribute nodes. And we're going to come into this direction and pick up this. This is going to give us 25 strength plus the 8 strength from here. So that's a good amount of strength before we start heading down further into Titan blood or Giant's blood. So you should hopefully have the strength to turn this on and be active. You should be just around level 40 something across all the points that we've invested up to this point. So you should be good to go. If you're not, you need to do some trading and move things around to get yourself active with more strength on your build. So outside of that, I would say you're then going to choose this, and this. This is going to give you 15 more strength, but defend with 200% of your armor against critical hits, which is great, but you're going to get some armor increase on the way over to this. So that'll be a good little stopgap. Once we've gotten that shored up too, we're going to drop down here for a lot of increased damage with our two-handed weapons, because remember, even though we're using it in one hand, it is still considered a two-handed weapon. And we're going to pick up this notable for 30% increased area of effect if you've stunned an enemy with a two-handed weapon recently, which you're going to do. And then this one for 40% increased damage with two-handed weapons and a 20% increased stun buildup. The trade-off here is 5% reduced attack speed, so do keep that in mind. We're going to come back down over here to Giant's Blood, and we're going to pop into this direction. And this is going to increase the magnitude of jagged ground you create, meaning it's going to slow down more, which is cool, but we want these two things. Chance for bleeding to be aggravated, meaning that we'll do more damage, 100% physical damage, I believe it is, if it aggravates. And then 40% increased jagged ground duration, meaning our totems can tap into it for longer. And enemies in jagged ground you create take 10% increased damage. So we want that damage being poured on from those sources. So after that, that's probably a good baseline for your leveling build. But let's progress this. Actually, you know what, before we do, take this, because this is going to increase the skill effect duration of our totems. So this is your baseline for leveling. You should be probably around level like 45, 46 once you've done everything in this section. And you've also chosen more ascendancy points. So let's put 2 more points into this because you've just finished your Trial of Chaos. Break armor equal to 10% of hit damage dealt, meaning that every time you do your damage, you're going to help break that armor. We're really leaning on tons of armor break because it really opens up the amount of physical damage we can do to things, removing those immunities. So let's go ahead now and swap this to maybe more of a mid-game build now. So now that we've kind of come to this point, like I said, you're just going to choose what makes sense for how you're progressing through the game. Are you starting to suffer with some defense? Well, let's get that online. Are you really not doing a lot of offense? Well, we can turn that on as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at some things here and what we're going to focus on. We want to get this notable particularly. 1% increased damage per 1% chance to block. So at our max, our cap of 75%, this turns on 75% increased damage. We want that active because that is going to be a crucial bump to our damage. So I'm just going to, rather than kind of stepping you through click by click, we're just going to click that because we want that turned on. And we want to choose one direction towards notables. We don't want to just choose the whole entire node unless it really does make sense. In this case, we want to choose these right ones because they turn on more block chance. We're going to turn off attack skills, 10% increased damage while holding a shield. Those are good, but we want to focus more on what we're going to get from that block chance. In addition to, we're going to come up here to grab one more endurance charge, but this also is going to give us increased armor if you've consumed an endurance charge. Remember, we are consuming our endurance charge whenever we use that Infernal Cry. We're going to pick this up for increased physical damage, and also break armor is increased. Oh, let's do this one right here, just like that. I didn't want this to, yeah, there we go, boom. Kind of weird. So increased physical damage, of course, but also breaking armor is crucial as well. Down over here, we're going to jump to this jewel socket and then jump into this increased stun buildup and gain an endurance charge when you heavy stun a rare or unique. This helps us off with a lot of boss pushing to use those endurance charges to give us, what was it? More armor, right? So it gives us more defense. And we're also going to push up to this for hits that heavy stun enemies have Culling Strike. So now we can just pretty much blow up a whole entire swath of creatures. Some other little pickups that we're going to grab here: increased area effect, after a shock area of effect, helping us do more, area of effect damage. And then this entire cluster. If you really want to focus on a lot more melee damage, this cluster is going to be huge because this is going to give us 10% chance to aftershock for strike skills you use with maces and 20% more damage against heavy stun enemies. And then all this does more damage or stun buildup with your mace. So this is one of the few times I'd say click everything in this cluster because it's all going to be advantageous. Some other little pickups as well is this little cluster for 15% increased area of effect for attacks and attack area damage. This guy for, where is it? 100% increased armor break duration. So once we break their armor, it will now last longer, which is really nice. Now for the two things that I did not focus on, because I want you to decide when you're going to focus on them. It's our totem stuff. So totems right now are weird. They're great because we're using them in this build as a vehicle for Aftershock, for Jagged Ground, and stuff like that. In the future, we want to use it for this Ancestral Call. So when you get your next 2 points of Ascendancy, you're going to jump that up to Imploding Impacts. Then your last 2, you're going to put into Answered Call to make it so you get Ancestral Spirits whenever you summon a totem. They will help you out because those Ancestral Spirits are going to help give you block chance. They're going to help mitigate damage. They're going to help buff you in damage. They're going to do damage themselves. They're going to do stun buildup. Right now, they're a little lackluster, and anything you put into the skill gem portion of them doesn't really seem to buff them. But this is the direction I wanted to take because I don't like Turtle Charm. Can block damage from all hits while shield is not raised, which is awesome. That's not bad at all, but it's 35% less block chance. So now I need to spend more passives to get that 35% shored up. I'd rather just have the pure damage from it and use my totems to create a lot more destruction. But back on the note of our totems, also we want to come down here, offset some of that attack speed that we had to deal with earlier with this guy right there, Blurred Motion. So now that we've talked about pretty much all of our notables, all of our keystones, all that, let's look at our setup for our totems. Your totem passives are going to depend upon, like I said, when you really want to turn those on more from the build. So we're going to come over here for increased totem damage and then get this 20% increased totem damage and 6% increased attack and cast speed if you summon a totem recently. So that is good. We're going to go this one for some more totem life. In fact, you could even take this one out if you wanted, as I look at it and say that's probably not worth it. So here's this jewel socket. We're going to come down here for totem damage. We're going to come down here for totem damage, totem life, regenerate 1% life per second while you have a totem. So it gives us some passive defense. Attack skills have a +1 max number of summoned totems. So now we're getting another totem. This gives us a 3rd totem and then more totem damage right there. You can come down here for more stuff if you'd like, for more totem damage if you'd like. We have 9 more points we can invest. But we're going to put them into other things across the board here. And honestly, what another big focus is that we want to take a look at how much totem play do we want to play around with. You can just kind of stop early. You can kind of go into this at whatever point makes sense for you. Like I said, that it's going to come down to a personal preference. So we're going to choose some of this here for some more armor, increased armor off of our body armor, some strength, some more block chance right there. And we're going to pick up these for more block chance as well. This will, of course, make it so that we've maxed out our block chance. And we don't need to worry about not being at that 75% cap. That's, of course, going to be absolutely crucial. So you can find this entire thing linked in the description below, like I said, but this is the progression, how I would kind of roughly go about this. And once you've gone to that Giant's Blood portion, just choose what nodes are going to make sense for how you're approaching the build. You know what? Like I said, I need that defense. Let me go more into something like my block chance. I need that offense. Well, then pick up all these nodes here for their 2-handed damage, for your break armor, for this one, for your 75% increase to damage. It's a balancing act. It's going to be up to you to determine, is your gear the thing that's holding you back, whatever it is, and just kind of make those pivots as needed. Now, regarding your gear, I don't have the best gear in the world. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I do. When you're starting the game out, you're going to use 2 maces or a single 2-handed weapon, whatever makes sense. I used a mace and a shield, but I found that I just had lackluster damage. And as soon as I moved over to dual wielding, my life changed. Dual wielding does change how some of these skills operate, right? They'll say stuff like, where is this? Perfect Strike. While dual wielding, both weapons hit with 30% less damage. So do whatever you're comfortable with, see whatever makes sense for you and how you want to progress through it. But I liked dual wielding, so I did dual wielding. But once I swapped over to a mace, a 2-handed mace and a shield, I wanted to take some specific focuses. So you want to make sure that your preferred weapon has percentage increase on physical damage and an increase on physical damage from an actual set variable right there, right? Like we have adds 12 to 20 physical damage. Because all of our things that say they convert stuff to fire damage, they convert their physical damage to fire damage. So having a high physical damage gives us more fire damage. Now you can, of course, increase fire damage, but you might as well go from the thing that's being pulled from and then increase on the back end if you get the chance to. This unfortunately has lightning damage. It's just how it rolled. It is what it is. We also want to focus on attack speed because that is going to make it a lot easier for us to get a lot of hits out. This has decent enough attack speed. And another big thing is at the point that you get Giant's Blood, reduced attribute requirements. This makes it, because remember, that number is tripled. That's what I need to actually use this piece of art. Like here, I'll take this off. Take this off. There, I'll take that off too. No, that doesn't have strength on. This does. I've got 209 strength active. This says 72 or 74. No, I need 226, whatever, 24, whatever it is, that number times 3. Because then I can't use it. So I had to socket in a ton of strength gear to get all my stuff active for those weapons. So know that going into it. Again, physical damage, and then socket in physical damage onto that weapon. For the rest of your gear, it's just going to be dependent upon what you want to what you need. You always want to focus on, though, max life and resistances. Those are the true defenses of this game. If you don't have those squared away, it doesn't matter about anything else. You need your max life. Your strength's going to give you a ton of max life anyway, so make sure you get that squared away. Increased armor always helps, but you want to just focus on those resistances. My resistances right now are not too great. Basically, you want to get like a baseline of like 30 or 40% as you're leveling up. Obviously, I'm only 44, right? I'm not like the max tier bro over here. But my point remains, if you wait too long to get your resistances online, you'll struggle and you'll think that everything's broken and you're going to get frustrated. Don't get frustrated. Just look at what's your resistance, what is lacking, what needs the resistance right now. Am I dealing with a bunch of fire stuff? Well, then put on fire or chaos resistant rings, or this is fire. Swap your rings are very easy solutions to your resistance game. Also charms. I was dealing with a lot of chaos damage and poison damage, so I put immunity to poison and chaos damage on my ring. Sure, it's only 17%, but that's 17% less damage that I have to take. Just make sure you're working on those things. Make sure you focus on stuff like movement speed on your boots. If you want to get attack speed on things or mana leech, health leech, then by all means do it. If you can find it, do it. But health and resistance is key. The last thing I want to talk about in this section is your shield. With the most recent patch, we want to make sure that it has the most armor possible. This has 120 armor and then a 14% increased armor on it. The rest is all just gravy on top. If I get shield, if I get defense on it, or I'm sorry, resistances on it, whatever, that's great. Block chance isn't important because we chose that ascendancy that sets our block chance to 40%. We don't need to worry about it. But that's just another mod we don't need to pursue. And then I'm going to socket this and add more armor into it, right? You use the socket of iron and it puts more armor into it. And that is going to increase the damage that resonating shield charge, or whatever the other shield ability, all of them do. So they get more damage based off of every 15 armor. So play into this as much as you can. But this helps you out with your gear. We've gone over your passives, we've gone over your skills and your support gems. Let's bring this all together and kind of talk more about the build. As far as our rotation goes, I'll show this off and we'll kind of see how it blends together in actual combat. But the biggest thing is your earthquake and your totems. Those are the only things that matter to initiate engagements once you unlock them in the leveling process, which is going to be pretty quickly. So you're going to see how quickly this drops, but we're going to drop 2 down and right click and just get these going. So, I mean, you don't have to really get all 3 of those going, but just a point to just kind of show you how this stuff operates. It's pretty much using the totems and using the earthquake to destroy stuff. You do not need to worry about getting all 3 earthquakes down. You don't need to run around your base. You just need to focus different directions. You don't need to worry about just getting all of it placed at once. Just simply get your totems down and get 1 or 2 earthquakes. It's all you'll need. Then once you do that, you're going to get a ton of stun buildup. It'll be denoted above things' heads. You'll press Bone Shatter to just go ahead and detonate that, or you can use your Leaping Slam to detonate it, because remember, Leaping Slam is a slam. So if we come over here real quick, we'll show how we can put this together. We got some stuff chasing me. We'll drop down totems. I'll press this, and you can see all that stun buildup. We just press Q and it detonates with it, right? Or in my case, Q is Bone Shatter, sorry. But we still have a single target. We can drop a totem, hold down Perfect Strike, time it properly, and we're good to go. That's another thing I will say. Perfect Strike is very tedious. If I hold it down, that was not a Perfect Strike. You have to hold it down, and as soon as you see the flash, let it go, and you'll see that big gust of fire. That's how you know you did a Perfect Strike. Also, you notice they'll just have a ton of health missing. So we do this, do that. Now, another approach to this build you can do is simply doing this and holding down your shield, using your resonating shield. And that's going to just armor break and bleed and just do all sorts of fun stuff. So just to kind of showcase what that would look like, we can probably find some more enemies right around this corner. Hopefully, yes, so maybe so. Just this guy? No, thank you, Gollum. I will not be taking you out to dinner anytime soon. When you're here, you're all out Olive Garden. So we can just go ahead and do this. And just press Q on anything that has got a build up and stay inside a set that's blowing me up. But you can see we built an endurance charge, which we can use Infernal Cry for, and then just go ahead and have more fun. So just kind of rotate those things around, see what fits for you, how the build operates with it. It's pretty much just dropping these down, getting an earthquake going, and going to town. With a boss, you're going to do the same exact rotation, but instead you're only going to use Resonating Shield to do that, a lot of the damage to get the boss's armor to break, and then you can kind of use Mace Strike, mix those things as needed, just kind of play around with that stuff. The last thing here is you have a Sunder that you can use when you're dealing with enemies that are from afar that you can't get to aside from using your Leap and Slam. So this gives you a little bit of play when things are running at you in a big wave. Go ahead and Sunder and have some fun with that. So it just gives you a little bit of range capability. So how does this build perform? Will you like it? Is it going to be good? Honestly, I love this build. And it was something that I kind of hobbled together as I progressed through the game. I was like, okay, what tags are kind of similar here? Okay, I've got a lot of Slam, I've got a lot of Jagged Ground, I've got a lot of Earthquake. I'll play around with those. And I really wanted to really have Totems be a huge focus, a huge focal point for this build. So I built around those as well. I'm not going to lie to you. Again, like I said, Titan is maybe the better ascendancy for this. But I wanted Totems to be the thing that I led with. So that's why Totems are the way that they are in this build. We've used Totems as a means to trigger all the multiple effects that we're trying to ride off of the build. And we're also doing tons of armor break, which is a Warbringer exclusive kind of thing. And eventually, once Ancestral Spirits feel a little bit more robust, I feel like this build will truly pop off. I will tell you too that, and I probably maybe should have put this in the gear section, the biggest holdback that you're going to deal with this build and every warrior build is your weapon. Make sure you're up to date with your weapon. If you notice that you're struggling to get through a zone, it's because your weapon is starting to lag behind. In that case, jump onto the trade website, find a new weapon and buy it. Or just find a good base weapon that is a higher item level than your current weapon and use an Orb of Alchemy on it, or transmute it up to another one and use Exalted, whatever you have to do to craft one that makes it better. Who gives a shit if people say, oh, wait for those to trade or whatever? It's an ARPG. ARPGs are games of abundance, meaning that you are always going to get more gear, more gems, more currency, whatever. Just go ahead and use it. Who cares? If you don't use it and lose it, I don't know, it's a 40-year-old virgin joke. But either way, stick to getting the most up-to-date weapon, and you'll find that this build will not lag behind. If you do not do that, you will start to hit points that it will push against you. But I think you'll have so much fun here, smashing down these earthquakes, just smashing down these totems, and really bringing this thing to life. And really, once you get a lot of the value going with a lot of the Ascendancy Plus stuff, you'll get a lot of value going with all the armor breaks and the bleeds. You'll just notice that things are just going to melt in front of you. You're not going to have to actively do as much because it's just kind of there. Then when you get to bosses, that's a more active time for you. And you're going to use your totems to divert attention away from the boss. You'll use them, you'll drop them down. The boss will sometimes focus on the totems and not you, which is a cool kind of off tank because they can't really tank tons of damage, but they can tank enough that you can get around, do whatever you need to with Perfect Strike. Perfect Strike takes a ton of time to wind up with a two-handed weapon, but the payoff is huge. You'll be chunking 5-10k health off of these things in Act 1 and 2 and be like, well, I guess this is doing the job. So that was originally the biggest pain point of this build, was very low single target damage with amazing wave clear and mapping capability. And we've been able to shore that up by using these capabilities with support gems and turning Perfect Strike into a beast of a destructive capability to melt bosses fast. So That's the build. That's everything that we've gone over. I'm going to be changing this build as I play through and as I experiment with more support gems and add more support gems in. I haven't wanted to expand many things past the first 2 sockets because I've wanted to see how they truly play in cruel difficulty and then endgame onward. So that is going to dictate how this all will change. And I will update the build guide below as I make those changes, so you can kind of follow along and a pivot in real time. Passive tree wise, I think the passive tree is pretty much set. If you are an experienced warrior, you're an experienced Path of Exile 1 player, by all means, let me know. Hey, I think you did a really good job with this portion of the passive tree, but you're probably better off going in this direction over here, or this is a better suited capability. I originally had more fire built into this build, but I found that it was just kind of being shoehorned in rather than an actual focus. So there's plenty of ways that you can pivot this thing. Please use this guide as a means to inspire yourself on how to change this build or make it different, make it your own. I cannot encourage that enough. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. Have a good one and take care.